Assalamu alaikum, you are watching Pivot and I'm your host Dr. Talat. In today's program, we are about to discuss about Kashmir and 100 days of atrocities by Indian security forces. As we know that following the step taken by the Indian government on 5th August 2019, Kashmiris have been restricted to their homes. Basic amenities and basic the rights that they have to life has been restricted for Kashmiris in Indian held Kashmir, and Indian government and Indian security forces are coming very heavy upon the innocent children, women, and older people inside Kashmir. Today, we have more than 100 days that Kashmiris are suffering from these atrocities. And we have seen Pakistan took number of steps following that illegal annexation. And we also expected a lot from the world community. And we saw that world community did not come to help in substantial terms. So it's very important to see where do we go from here with regards to plight of Kashmiris and with regards to resolution of this long-standing issue between India and Pakistan. So this is a very important topic, and to discuss this issue, we have with us today Majid Mehmood, who is an eminent researcher, and he works on India-Pakistan, he writes on India-Pakistan, and works for Institute of Strategic Studies. Welcome, Majid.
Thank you.
Majid, first of all, we'd like to ask you, since 100 days have passed with the Indian Army and Indian forces, committing atrocities over Kashmiri population at large in Indian-held Kashmir. What's your general comments about what is happening in Indian-held Kashmir at the moment?
So, in Indian-occupied Kashmir, what India is trying to do is to psychologically crush the resistance of Kashmiri Muslims there. And we have seen the escalation in the brutal tactics by the Indian security forces and the police and the other instruments that India has there in occupied Kashmir, both legal and political. So at this time, they are trying to crush the psychological cohesion of, I would say, the Kashmiri Muslims there. And the situation has gotten only worse. Over 100 days have passed now, and we have seen communication lockdown. We have seen small kids, children being picked up by the Indian security forces, and according to certain credible reports, Human Rights Watch reports, they have been transferred not to the Kashmiri jails in Kashmir, but to jails in mainland India, New Delhi and other regions, even to an extent of putting them in Mumbai jails as well. So therefore, then there is an internet lockdown there. Communication blackout is there, and only partial services are available in terms of communication, not the internet. Internet remain closed. The school, colleges, and the universities, they are closed. So the students and the young people are suffering their academic life as well. So in the overall scenario, the picture remains bleak, and there are serious human rights violations that have been conducted by the Indian security forces there. So this is the overall situation in Kashmir and what India is trying to do. So India is trying to also assess the impact of its actions so that it could move towards step 2, which would be to normalize the situation in occupied Kashmir so that it could hold certain local level elections.
Okay, I think that we'll be discussing in subsequent questions. Now, you explained the situation very well as to what is happening in Kashmir. Now, the first thing that we in Pakistan expected was the international community's response to August 5 action. So, why, what's the international community's reaction to the Kashmir issue? And what do you think, why, if there's some reluctance on their part, why is that reluctance?
If you see what is meant by international community, we need to understand that. International community means major powers. major global powers, and their institutional interests in United Nations and other international organizations. So, why they have not been able to forthcome and condemn India and to stop India in conducting the human rights violations in India occupied Kashmir? The reason is very clear that they, number one, they have strategic interest in India. Military, economic, political interest in India that we are well aware of. America is trying to build India to counter China in the region, so it won't. So Kashmir is not a priority for them, and in fact, America wants to solve this issue in a way that that Kashmir is removed as an obstacle to the Indian rise in the region. Then Russia, France, Britain, they have their own economic and military interest, and their defense industries are very well linked with the Indian defense industries. So overall, these are the reasons that that gel India strongly with the international community, not because of its so-called democracy, not because of its values, because its Indian values are clearly being demonstrated in India and against other minorities as well within India as well. So this is the reason. Secondly, we need to understand that the international community itself, in their own areas of influences and in other regions of the world, have been accused of conducting the same human rights violations against the Muslim countries and the non-Muslim countries, both. So to expect them to come to the aid of the helpless Kashmiris, I think we should review this conception. Building an international public opinion is something else that can be done with or without the consent of major powers. But to expect them to intervene on our behalf against India, I think we need to review this assessment.
Right. You mentioned about human rights abuses that are being carried out in Indian held Kashmir. Now, that would mean that international community is even not alert to, or is turning blind eyes to human rights issues too, because they are not turning up and telling world, okay, look, at least stop human rights violation. Do you think this human rights violation with regard to Kashmir is becoming irrelevant?
There are two aspects to it. One is that if you see the coverage of international media, especially the major Western press, so they have been pressing the issue of human rights violations against India. Major American outlets and the European outlets, for example, New York Times, Washington Post, Economist have recently published an article against the human rights violation by India. So there is the Western press is highlighting this issue. But it is not addressing the source of the problem, which is India's action themselves. But due to the coverage of the Western press, the human rights angle of the Kashmiri struggle that has kept alive in the international conversations, I would say. Secondly, so this was about the international media coverage, and India has been complaining about with their American counterparts that we are not getting favorable coverage. Our viewpoint is not being understood within the American press. So that is that. But would it have any substantive effect on Mr. Modi to so that he would be sweating, or he would be under such a pressure that he would reverse his actions and give out any concessions? That will never happen because there is no political pressure by the Western governments.
We shall continue discussion, Majid. I need to take a short break here. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back. Majid, we were discussing about human rights issues inside Kashmir. Now, Indian government, there are reports, Indian government says that we have actually relaxed curfew conditions in some part of the Kashmir. But, Kashmiris are not resorting to, or they're not resuming to normal life in Kashmir. Do you think it's kind of silent protest against India, or the reports are wrong?
No, the reports are not wrong, and but the Kashmiri reaction to these certain relaxation in certain areas, I would say, for a certain amount of time. The Kashmiri resistance to that and the reaction to those initiatives, Indian initiatives, speaks volume of the resentment and anger within the Kashmiri Muslim population, and and it shows that they, as soon as the curfew is lifted, they will gonna resist by all means that are available to them. And talking about the Indian restrictions, it was due to certain factors. For example, there were examinations, board examinations of matriculations and other institutions. So that is why they opened certain schools and colleges, so that there could be people, students coming here to save their academic years from spoiling. But even because the fear is such of Indian occupation, is that many of the parents, there are reports that they haven't, majority of the parents have not sent their kids, because there are fears of them being picked up by the agencies, by the Indian security forces, and put them into those years which are even not accessible to the parents, which means that actually exporting those so-called prisoners to mainland India. So this is the situation there, and there is no India would actually relax the situation in occupied Kashmir if it is certain that the resistance would not be much to it.
Okay. When we say, there's a kind of resistance expected from Kashmiris when the curfew is lifted, there are going to be problems. Now, what do you think, what Modi government will do to prevent certain instability situation created in Kashmir? Because I think unstable Kashmir would cause a lot of problems for India in the, I think, entire Indian territory. And it's important for them to quell this resistance here. So what do you think, how will they prevent, what measures are they expected to take to prevent this instability in Kashmir?
Well, the Indian government is genuinely fearful about the prospects of strong resistance if and when it lifts the curfew. But we also seen that India is an experienced occupier. It has been occupying Kashmir territory for more than 50-60 years. So what it could do is that it could, if it relaxes the curfew, it could reimpose the curfew. Because as we said in the start, the Indian aim is to psychologically crush the resistance. So they would offer certain carrots that we are gradually lifting. For example, they could say that we are gradually lifting the cellular blackout or the internet blackout. So these are the things that they would slowly take into account. But what they would actually do is that they would try to organize certain political forces to give a sense of normalcy, that the situation is normal, and local body elections will happen in both union territories, and to give a semblance of stability to the international press and say that it is all Pakistan sponsored fear and paranoia, but the actual situation in Kashmir is normal. So India will try to do that, and this is the main thing I think that Pakistan should be focused on in its policy options on that front.
Okay, we discussed about Kashmir, and we discussed subsequently about Pakistan's reaction. I would just like you to tell us that what we at first place expected from Islamic world, Organization of Islamic Countries, and of course Islamic world, since we claim that it's a problem with regards to Muslims of India. Many analysts think that since they are Muslims, that is why they are not, world is not actually paying attention. What to talk of world, even Islamic world has not also been paying that kind of attention to issue of Kashmir, the kind of attention it needed. So what's your take on how Islamic world should have behaved, or how Islamic world should have reacted to what is happening in India, particularly with regards to the fact that it is specific to Muslims of Kashmir, not Hindus and other communities of Kashmir?
Well, the overall response of the Muslim governments have been disappointing, to say the least, and there are reasons for it. the reaction has been, for instance, they have expressed concerns from the OIC platform, and in the other statements they have asked India to relax the restrictions that it has imposed in the occupied territories. So, but this is like expecting calling out India to do this in a very light manner, not with the strong worded statements. Well, the Muslim world can do a lot. I mean, India's strategic interest and economic interest in the Gulf are alone sufficient to build a pressure, if they so desire, to India that these economic and political links would be we will reconsider it, or they would be at a risk, these interests, if you do not do, for example, 3-4 things that we should say. So India will be receptive to that pressure, but that pressure is not happening, and there are involvements of major powers, particularly the United States, that is a major factor in the calculation of those governments. So they should do more, I think, and this is a Muslim issue. This is not just a Pakistani issue, and Pakistan should amplify this issue as a Muslim issue, so that to rally the larger Muslim public opinion, besides the governments, to build up pressure.
Okay, Majid, I think we also have to have a short break here. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing about Islamic world's reaction to Kashmir issue. So, since we're discussing reaction by Islamic world, constitute many countries in the world. What is your opinion about reaction by the West? Those who are proponent of human rights in entire world. Where is civilized world? Those who claim that we are civilized countries, and where are the democratic values of the civilized world? What do you think? What should have been the reaction of civilized world, and what is their reaction to Kashmir issue?
Well, to put it bluntly and straightforward, there was no civilization expressed by the civilized world regards to the human rights violation in Indian occupied Kashmir, and we have discussed the reasons that their governments have strategic interest with India. The only issue that have been on display is that their media, because it's somehow liberal, it somehow values human rights to an extent of press coverage. So they have been raising this issue in their editorials, in their headlines, but concrete steps to pressurize India, that has not happened, and people were expecting it would happen, but it won't happen because of the political and strategic interests of these Western powers, or the so-called civilized nations.
Okay, and briefly we can also touch upon, we're discussing Islamic world, the world. What do you think about Pakistan? Because Pakistan is a major key stakeholder in Kashmir issue. What do you think Pakistan's reaction to Kashmir issue was adequate, and what is expected of Pakistan in future?
Pakistani reaction to the latest Indian moves have been limited to raising the issue at the global level. We went to all the relevant forums. We raised the voice of the Kashmiri people, and to raise the international public opinion in favor of Kashmiris and Pakistani cause, of course. But there is, of course, space to do more, and this is not enough of an objective that we are trying to move an international opinion, but there are many other factors that are not in Pakistani control. So what we need to do, we need to be more politically strong and diplomatic strong actions. We need to take strong actions because we have seen that what we have done is not enough. So and it should be, all our future political and diplomatic action should be backed by military options as well. because without the combined pressure, India would not listen to you.
Okay. Now, the one most important thing is that India actually, since 1949, it has been buying time on Kashmir. So when you buy time on Kashmir or any other issue, you actually consolidate your position. So there's a feeling in the research community that since India bought time over and over again,
Yes.
so it has consolidated its position in Kashmir. That is why sometimes back it was propagated that on Kashmir maybe United Nations resolutions have become irrelevant.
Yes.
So that kind of thing is given a a wide coverage that it's no more relevant to talk about Kashmir. Since this 5 August happened, we expected that maybe this opens an avenue for some kind of resolution of Kashmir issue, but since that has taken time, so the danger has emerged of Kashmir situation becoming a new normal. Do you agree with this theory of new normal?
Yes, I agree, because the only factor that has prevented India of taking radical actions that it has taken in the form of August 5, ending its special status and converting into two union territories, was the Pakistani military deterrence. That it was always a major factor in Indian calculations about Kashmir. Since India has seen that it is not coming, or it is delayed, or for our strategic reasons, it has time and space to further strengthen the new realities in occupied Kashmir, the new realities of bifurcation and creating of two new union territories. So as long as the time passes, there is no international strong reaction to that, and there is not enough military deterrence from the Pakistani side, India will be able to, in a long haul, not in the short term, but in the long haul, it will be able to further entrench the new status quo, and as you have rightly pointed out, the new normal, as they say. So absence of Pakistani military response, the new normal will be established.
Right. Some analysts also think that India has got into a problem. India has got into a trouble. So, for instance, some people, have just, I recall some of the conversations where they say India has actually committed a kind of blunder and they would face this in elsewhere in their country. And with the passage of time, I think they will fall in trouble. Do you think really Indian leaders, Indian government is losing sleep over Kashmir, or they expect something, really bad happening as a reaction?
What they are fearful of is the Kashmiri resistance that will inevitably happen when and if the curfew is lifted. So that will happen, and Indian policymakers are losing sleep, as you say, to that thing. But what is the comfort zone for them? The comfort zone for them is that there is no possibility, from their angle, there is no possibility of Kashmiris getting an external help from multiple resources, particularly Pakistan. So as long as that doesn't happen, India is in a comfortable zone, so to speak. It will take time to psychologically or politically and physically manage the Kashmiri resistance. And it has been doing that for last 50-60 years. So it is afraid of instability as a result of genuine Kashmiri resistance and uprising in all forms and manifestation, political, military. But it is in a comfort zone because there is no external help, so to speak, coming to the Kashmiri Muslims.
Like Majid, last question is that it is very important to have some kind of resolution in sight. So what do you think? What is way forward on Kashmir?
So for the short term, I think the objective should be to lift the curfew, and Pakistan should, I think, move beyond moral, diplomatic, and political support to ensure that the curfew is lifted. Because our case will be strengthened when the curfew is lifted and people are on the streets uprising against India. So in order to facilitate that uprising, you need to lift the curfew. And Pakistan has to do more in that sense. So the immediate objective should be to lift the curfew. Then talking about the long-term larger solution, As you have rightly pointed out previously, that Indian actions have actually made United Nations resolutions, Shimla Agreement, and all other bilateral agreements related to Kashmir obsolete. And we have moved back to the ceasefire line 1948 situation. So from that onward, Pakistan should consider all possible options on the table to resolve Kashmir situation according to Kashmiri aspirations and Pakistani aspirations, to let them have their voice. So when you have all options on the table, then you can sit confidently with the Indians to and pressurize them to offer more political space to the Kashmiris, and that would lead to some sort of solution. So this is I think the short term and the long term way forward, in my view, that will actually help Pakistan and the Kashmiris.
Thank you very much, Majid. You came and discussed very important issue that Pakistan is confronting at the moment. Thank you very much coming to our show.
Thank you.
Viewers, I think this is important to find some solution to this Kashmir issue, not only on part of India and Pakistan, but the larger world community should also be on board to see that human rights violations in Indian held Kashmir are stopped. Kashmiris spend about 100 days in extreme conditions, atrocities being committed against them, and the world all over has not reacted to this. This is also very alarming. Are we looking for a world which is peaceful and stable, and where human rights of everyone are respected, or otherwise? It's important to dwell on these issues, and we shall continue to do that until next week. Allah Hafiz.